Chapter 35. Hunted. 1 year ago. The laughter settled down once the last few partygoers stepped out of the Swan Tavern, the best tavern in Harrington. Navarra shivered as snow blew in from the open door, but when it shut and she was the only one in the tavern, she nestled down into a chair by the hearth. She took a sip of her spiced tea, then set it down and got out her journal and pencil. She put a checkmark by the words, "Attend the festival of the winter solstice." "Having fun?" said a voice from behind her.
"Gostimir,"
she said, turning around and smiling from ear to ear.
"You wouldn't believe all that happened today. Wait, I thought I had to light a candle for you to appear."
"Oh, that's right," Gostimir said. Then he disappeared. Navarra waited a moment, and when he did not return, she took out her candle and lit the wick. Poof! Gostimir was there with a grin. Navarra laughed.
"You are too much."
"I hope I'm not too much. I hope I'm just enough."
"Look here,"
Navarra said, showing him her list.
"I did almost all the things you suggested. For the snowball fight, I rallied the children in the square. It was a battle of epic proportions. Although it ended when little Sasha's snowball hit the sheriff in the face. I would have laughed, but I didn't want to lose my job as deputy so soon."
She looked at the other events checked off on her list. Sled race on Manor Hill, eat persimmon pastries with oozy fillings, sing festive songs. Navarra held up her mug.
"And now here I am."
She sipped her tea.
"You were right. Ginger and cardamom really do make it better. The flavor is just perfect."
"And now we can do one of my favorite things. Nothing." Gostimir sighed loudly and reclined in the chair across from Navarra, his ethereal form floating above the cushion. Then he flexed his fingers and pretended to warm them by the fire. Navarra shook her head and smiled.
"I can't say I understand why these things will help my training as your warlock, but they're fun all the same. If only you could enjoy them with me. I wish you could leave the Feywild. I wish you could be here."
Navarra looked back at her journal, reading the other notes on her list. "I would like that too," Gostimir said, with a hint of sadness. "Actually, there is something I wanted to tell you about. Something quite serious. It's the reason I'm trapped."
"This one!"
Navarra pointed to a page in her journal. Then she went into an excited retelling of how she and Herkomoid had made a horse-sized dragon out of snow, then used a minor illusion to give it scales and lifelike eyes.
"Everyone who went past it jumped out of their skins."
Navarra laughed.
"And then there was the festival today. The food, the dancing. Oh, it was lovely."
Then she looked at Gostimir.
"I'm sorry. Were you saying something?"
Gostimir shook his head. "Never mind. It can wait until later. Tell me more about your day." Navarra's shins pressed into the cold, damp ground. She knelt and sat on her feet, her head bowed in shame. Herkomoid was curled up in the grass beside her.
"I've betrayed you," she said. "I've betrayed everyone. Henry, Rowan, Irina."
She was exhausted from weeping. Gostimir took her hand. He was wearing a dark green tunic, and the snowflakes around him moved slowly. "Navarra, you've saved your friends. They would be dead or worse if not for you. And they're able to bury the dragon skull today because of you." The others had left for Argynvostolt soon after their arrival at the windmill. For the first hour after they had gone, Navarra had cried off and on, while Gostimir comforted her, neither of them saying anything. It had been days since she had last talked with her patron. The pain of unbearable guilt pressed in on Navarra, threatening to suffocate her.
"I've betrayed myself," she said. "And I...
She choked on the words. "It's okay. Take your time," Gostimir said, sitting beside her, stroking her hair. She used to be able to tell Gostimir anything, But now she could barely speak. She dared not tell him any details, fearing it would hurt him too much. But she knew she had to tell him the truth, plain and simple. She moved to sit across from him, her head bent so low that her nose touched the grass.
Gostimir, I gave him my maidenhood.
A sob escaped her.
And even now, as I see what I've done, I can't be rid of my feelings for him.
She took a few deep breaths.
But I've never stopped loving you.
And it was true. Though affections for Strahd had taken root, none of it had diminished her love for Gostimir.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Gostimir continued to stroke her hair. After a moment he said, I don't blame you. None of this was your fault. Navarra looked up. The perpetual snow that usually followed him was gone, and 2 trails of tears were forming icicles down his cheeks.
Gostimir, please, please forgive me.
You've done nothing wrong, Navarra.
Haven't I?
No, you haven't, Gostimir said confidently.
But what if I didn't do it for my friends? Maybe I did it to save my own skin. Maybe I wanted to do it. Maybe I wanted to love him. Maybe I enjoyed it. I'm horrible.
You're not horrible. Strahd was in control the whole time. If your feelings for him had not been real, he would have seen through it. If you hadn't done what you did, you wouldn't be alive right now, and neither would your friends.
But I still want to see him,
Navarra said, her voice cracking.
And I hate myself for it. Forgive me, Gostimir.
Dear Navarra,
Gostimir shook his head.
Whatever wrong you think you've done, that I forgive completely.
Then he raised her from the ground and held her in his lap.
I love you, Navarra. There's nothing you can do that would make me love you less.
They kissed, and the guilt that had consumed Navarra was lifted. It was not gone entirely, but for the first time since being captured, she felt a sense of peace. Gostimir's warmth was real. It was not a pretense of magic. Then it occurred to Navarra the reason why Gostimir was the Prince of Winter. She had wondered how someone so warm and kind could be the prince of a season that was cold, grey, and made the world appear dead. Though he seemed capricious, Gostimir was something constant. He was like the evergreen that lived on while the winter world slept. He was the joy that saw brightness in the snow amid a season of darkness. He was everything good about winter.
I think I understand,
Navarra said, remembering the list he had given her almost a year ago.
You are the warmth I feel when I'm by the fire on a cold, snowy day. You are the happiness that fills me when I laugh with friends at solstice tide. You are the thrill I get when I sled down a snow-covered hill or catch snowflakes in my mouth.
Navarra held his face in her hands and wiped away his icicles of tears.
I love you, Gostimir.
The archfey tucked her hair behind her long ears and kissed her again. After a time, Navarra said,
Gostimir, is mercy ever wrong?
No, Navarra. Mercy is always a good thing. But being merciful doesn't mean allowing evil to prevail.
Then what am I to do when the others come back? I can't hate Strahd.
You don't have to hate him, but you do need to stop him.
Navarra nodded.
I know you'll do what's right to help the others, Gostimir said, but you need to let them know that you're on their side.
Navarra nodded again. Then she took off the emerald crown. Looking at it sent a different pang of guilt coursing through her heart. But she would not let it consume her. Instead, she focused on someone she could still hate.
I know where Keithlin is,
Navarra said, knitting her brow. Then she told Gostimir about the Amber Temple. She told him that Casimir had said he would guide them there after they retrieved the talisman from the Revenants.
Be careful, Navarra, Gostimir said.
Don't let hatred cloud your actions.
Don't you hate her too?
I never felt for Keithlin what you do for Strahd, but I've learned to forgive her. That doesn't mean I don't hate what she's done. I want more than anything for the curse to be lifted, for wrong to be put right, and I want to be free. But that's why you need to be careful when you see her. Madame Eva's cards may have led you to things that would help in your fight against Strahd, but Keithlin is the only person who knows how to break the curse.
Well, Navarra said, I won't kill her outright, if that's what you're worried about. But once we get what we need...
Be very careful. She's powerful, and when you see her you might be surprised what you find.
The only thing I'll find is an ugly hag, Navarra said.
Oh, Keithlin is that, but I always had the impression that she didn't used to be. Her hideousness has grown over the years. I can't imagine how horrid she looks now. Navarra put her nose in the crook of Gostimir's neck. He smelled like a mountain on a crisp day. Then she put her fingers through his long hair.
Gostimir?
Yes?
Will you marry me?
Yes. Navarra hugged him tight.
Oh, Gostimir, once Henry comes back, I'll ask him to officiate. We could get married right here, in this fane, today. I mean tonight. Or whatever it is.
That soon?
Why not? Aren't you the one who loves to do things on the spur of the moment?
Of course I do,
and I will. But
it might be good to wait. His smile was reassuring, but cautious. Navarra bit her lip, and Gostimir lowered his head to look her in the eyes. I just want you to be sure, Navarra, and I don't think you're ready to make this decision yet. She hated that he had to say it, but the truth was, her heart was still torn. In the end, Navarra agreed to wait. What you need now is rest, Gostimir said. He lay down on the cold ground, and Navarra lay beside him. Did you know there's a place in dreams where Fae can wander together? He asked.
Show me,
Navarra said. Close your eyes, and I'll meet you there. Navarra slept and dreamed. The dream was so perfect and so real that when she woke, she thought she might be slipping into a nightmare. This place called Barovia was the dream, and the place with Gostimir was reality. How long had they slept? An hour? A day? The dream felt like it could have gone on for eternity. Navarra wished it had. At least Gostimir was still beside her when she opened her eyes. Suddenly, there was a light that cut through the night sky. Navarra and Gostimir sat up to see what it was. Off to the west, they could see a bright beacon in the direction of Argynvostholt. They did it, Gostimir said. Lord Argynvost is finally laid to rest. Oi, said a voice from underneath a pile of dirty clothes. Navarra stood over a bed on the third floor of the windmill and poked the laundry pile again.
Victor, Navarra said. Wake up. It's me. It's Navarra.
Victor threw off an old shirt that was covering his bleary eyes.
Navarra? What are you doing here? Wait, how'd you get in without me alarm going off? Oh, that's right. You have that face step spell. Just come back later. You know I don't wake up till noon.
It took some time before Navarra convinced Victor that Mother Night had brought eternal darkness on the land, and whatever hour used to be noon was long past. Once he got out of bed, Navarra smacked him on the back of his head.
Oi,
he yelled, rubbing his mess of hair.
What was that for?
Navarra smiled.
Just something an old friend told me to do.
She couldn't believe she had forgotten to tell the others about Mordenkainen.
You have weird friends,
Victor said.
It's so good to see you again.
Navarra hugged him. Victor leaned into the hug.
Come on,
Navarra said, pushing him off her.
I want you to meet Gostimir.
Who?
My fiancé.
Navarra grabbed Victor's hand and dragged him all the way to the fane, where Gostimir stood waiting. When Navarra explained that he was a fae, Victor shrugged his shoulders, unimpressed.
I read somewhere that fae magic is just hypnosis that pixies use to fool people, Victor said. It's not real magic.
Victor went on to describe what real magic was. His pedantic explanation went on and on. As he talked, Navarra watched Victor growing smaller and smaller, until he was no bigger than a pixie himself. Navarra cast a suspicious look at her patron. Gostimir's playful eyes glanced innocently around the fane, as if he did not notice Victor's unusual size. But she knew Gostimir had shrunken him.
"Hey!"
Victor's little voice squeaked.
"Unshrink me right now, you overgrown fairy!"
For the next few hours, Navarra learned how to counter charms and enchantments. If anyone was better at charms than Strahd, it was Gostimir. Having had his own mind enchanted by Keithlin for years before breaking free, Gostimir knew everything there was to know about charms, how to cast them, how to modify them, how to resist them, and even how to turn them on someone.
"Gostimir,"
Navarra asked while they practiced,
"remember when you had me say a silly sentence every day?"
"Silly? Me?"
Navarra grinned.
"Yes, you."
"You may say whatever you wish."
Victor, now his normal size, was practicing his own spells in the woods nearby. But when Navarra heard crashing branches and shouts of profane language, she decided to offer him some help. Victor was trying to cast an evocation spell.
"I just need something to be able to defend myself if I'm attacked," he said.
"Have you tried fire or lightning?" Navarra asked.
"What do you think I've been trying to do?"
Then Navarra remembered what the older Victor had said to her on the mountain.
"Thank you for the tip. I used to show your technique to my students at the houses."
"Victor," Navarra said, "I'd like to teach you Eldritch Blast."
"That's a warlock spell. I'm having enough trouble as it is casting a wizard's evocation spell. How could I possibly learn—"
"Trust me," Navarra said,
and she began to teach him. Rowan, Henry, Irina, and Casimir came back victorious. When they snapped their fingers into the woodfane, having come through Berez, Gostimir spooked and vanished. Victor was back in the windmill by now, but Navarra wanted to hear the whole story. She listened eagerly as they told her about Sir Godfrey's gratefulness, and how they had released the spirits of the revenant knights when they laid the skull in the mausoleum. Casimir pulled out the talisman from under his cloak. "It paralyzes vampires," he said. "I can feel that it's powerful, but I think it will take some skill to properly wield its magic." Casimir weighed the sunburst pendant in his hand. "Let's hope it works," Henry said. "How are you, Navarra? You look much better."
"I am better,"
Navarra said jovially, patting her dress. While they had been dreaming together, Gostimir had cast a spell to turn her black gown into a green one. Even now, outside the dream, it was still green.
"I'm completely myself now," she said. "And I need to tell you all about the Mad Mage of Mount Baratok."
She revealed to them that the wizard from Stanimir's story, the one who had led the attack on Ravenloft a year ago, was in fact Mordenkainen. But she left out the bit that he was also Victor. She wanted her friends to see it for themselves.
"We need to go there before we go to the Amber Temple."
"Well," Henry said, rubbing his jaw, "I'm glad you're better, Navarra, but I don't think we should go there. You went to Mount Baratok while you were Strahd's prisoner. How do we know Mordenkainen isn't on his side?" Navarra did her best to persuade them that Mordenkainen was on their side, but each of her friends still wore a skeptical expression.
"You'll just have to trust me,"
Navarra urged them.
"It really will be the best place for Irina to hide. Think about it. What's one of the most famous spells that Mordenkainen ever wrote? Something that would keep Irina safe from Strahd until the curse is broken."
At first no one gave an answer. Then Henry squinted his eyes and asked, You mean the mansion spell?
Yes,
Navarra said.
Mordenkainen's magnificent mansion. That spoon of his. I thought he was mad when he showed it to me. But then I remembered that a silver spoon is needed as a material component for that spell. The mansion is how he's been able to hide from Strahd for the past year. It's only when Mordenkainen leaves his mansion that Strahd can spot him. But while he's inside, no divination magic can find him there. The mansion is on another plane of existence. That's why it's the best place for Irina.
What's all this talk about Mordenkainen? Victor walked into the circle. You're not going to try and take me book back again, are you? Victor, Henry said, would you like to come with us to the mountains?
Me?
Victor asked.
Finally realized you need someone with skill, eh? Actually, it might be best if you stay here, Victor,
Navarra said. She had no idea what the implications might be if Victor met himself from the future. Would that create some kind of paradox?
You think I can't do it?
Victor was defensive.
You don't think I'm good enough for your little crew?
I think it would be great if you joined, Henry said, eyeing Navarra.
Do we really want a child to look after?
Rowan asked.
I'm 25,
Victor huffed.
Regardless of whether Victor comes, Irina said. What about you, Navarra? You've been through a lot. Are you sure you're up for going with us? Of course I am. I'm fine. I'm completely fine. Everything is great. In fact, I've realized that...
Navarra, my love. Strahd's voice was in her mind. Navarra froze, transfixed, not from magic, but from shock. Strahd was casting a sending spell to her mind. I am here, in the woods. I can see you. Come to me. Bring Irina with you. Do not tell her why. Navarra? Navarra? Henry asked.
What's wrong with her?
Victor asked.
I think she's having a panic attack,
Rowan said, rushing to her side.
Navarra, what's wrong?
Navarra's breathing was short and quick.
He's here.
No one needed to ask who she meant.
Shit, shit, shit,
Henry said, running his hands through his hair. Where? Casimir asked in a whisper. Navarra's eyes shifted to the tree line of the forest. We need to get out of here, Casimir said.
No, Strahd will kill us if we leave, Henry exclaimed. Remember, Gostimir said undead things can't enter the fanes.
Just then, Victor's alarm in the windmill blared loudly. They all looked to see Rahadin, accompanied by ghouls, going into the mill.
They're going to steal my book,
Victor said. Then he cast a spell on himself and flew away from the standing stones toward the mill.
Victor!
Henry and Irina yelled.
We'll have to go without him,
Navarra said. Henry rounded on her. We're not leaving Victor behind.
We don't have a choice. Look.
Navarra pointed at the host of wolves and skeletons emerging from the mist. They were surrounded. Suddenly, Gostimir appeared again. His eyes were wild, and he spoke in a tone that sent a chill up Navarra's back.
Navarra, all the fanes are surrounded. There are ghouls and skeletons at the Borg, and an army of tribesmen at the hill. What?
Irina cried.
Fuck, Henry said. We need to go now,
Navarra urged them all.
I can teleport at least 2 of us. Casimir, can you cast a teleportation spell?
It would only get us a few 100 feet away.
That's good enough, said Navarra. We can teleport away from the wolves and make a run for it. Head north to Mount Baratok.
No, Henry said. We would never make it.
Why not?
Navarra asked, desperate.
Strahd's horse is too fast. He'd catch us even if we fly.
No, he won't.
He will.
Do you have any better ideas? Does anyone?
Navarra looked around. A pack of wolves was stalking toward the ring of menhirs, baring their teeth.
We need to make a decision fast,
Irina said, drawing her sword.
Please, Navarra said. We can teleport.
We'll die if we try, Henry said. Navarra sank to her knees and put her hands in her face, hoping that someone would be clever enough to get them out. But Henry was only pulling his hair, and Rowan stood petrified like a frightened deer. Irina raised her sword, and Casimir pointed his wand, preparing to fight. But they could not win this fight. Not now, not like this. Navarra looked over in the grass and saw Gostimir's bare feet beside her. She stood up and wiped her eyes. Gostimir was looking out at the tree line. The Fae's constant flurry of snow swirled around him like a blizzard. Standing in the mist at the edge of the woods, staring back at the Fae, was Strahd. The two princes locked eyes as if preparing for a duel. But with one trapped in the Shadowfell and the other in the Feywild, neither was able to touch the other. A part of Navarra wanted to run to Strahd and beg him for mercy, but she knew it would do no good.
Gostimir,
Navarra said,
which fane would give us the best chance to escape?
Yester Hill, he said. There are more enemies there, but it's large enough that you can fly away before they're upon you, and I can buy you time. Navarra turned to her friends.
We're going to Yester Hill, she said firmly.
Just then the pack of wolves burst in among them, snarling and biting, but everyone snapped their fingers just in time. Navarra, Gostimir, Henry, Rowan, Irina, and Casimir appeared in the center of the hill fane, surrounded by a legion of mountain folk. A swarm of bats circled in the sky above, and standing at the gap in the stone wall was Gertruda. She pointed straight at Navarra and shrieked a command. The whole host of warriors responded by beating spears on shields and chanting a bloodthirsty war cry. The largest warrior, who stood beside her, a giant of a man, charged at the newly arrived companions, flashing his sword overhead. "I've got this," Gostimir said. He reached into his belt, grabbed something that could not be seen, and held it up like a two-handed weapon. "I didn't know you had an invisible sword," Henry said to him. Navarra put a hand on her face.
"Oh no, he doesn't. It's his imaginary sword."
"His what?" Henry asked. The giant warrior took a swing at Gostimir, but Gostimir parried the blow. "Clink," the Fae said, as the man's blade glanced off in mid-air. Something tangible had stopped it. The tribesman was utterly flummoxed. He tried to strike again, but each slash or thrust was turned away by Gostimir saying clink or shing or some other made-up sound of metal on metal. When the big man was red in the face from rage and confusion, Gostimir lunged with his pretend sword and stabbed it through his chest. The man looked down. There was no mark, no gash. Then Gostimir said, "Gotcha!" and withdrew the imaginary blade. Instantly, blood poured from a gaping wound under the man's breastbone. He staggered for a moment, looked at the Fae in bewilderment, then fell to the ground. Henry gaped. "What did I just see?"
"Gostimir has a strong imagination,"
Navarra said, amazed herself.
"Get them, you cowards!"
Gertruda screamed, and the mountain folk and the bats rushed to attack them. "Time to get cold," Gostimir said. He clapped his hands together, and all the snow that had been circling around him formed into an angry white cyclone that extended from his feet to the sky. He threw out his hands, and the deadly tempest of ice shot out in all directions. The whirlwind was so violent that the bats were scattered, and all the tribesmen were struck to the ground. But Navarra and her friends were protected in the eye of the storm. Now was their chance. Rowan and Casimir transformed into owls. Henry sprouted his wings and grabbed Irina. Navarra cast a flying spell. And the 5 companions flew from the fane. A strange wind carried them along. At first, Navarra thought it was Gostimir's storm, but she looked down and noticed a druid on the hillside waving his staff. It was Grugak, The man they had met in the pass. He was casting a wind spell to blow them safely away. Navarra thought it was odd, but she did not have time to wonder why the tribal druid might be helping them. Once they had flown a little over 3 miles to the southeast, they came within sight of the Luna River and dropped beneath the gnarled canopy of the woods to land among the trees. Now they were too far from Mount Baratok, and too many enemies barred their way to the north. Casimir convinced the others that their best hope now lay in seeking answers from Mother Night, so they decided to set out for the Amber Temple. Casimir led the party eastward through the thick forest, avoiding the Solanka Pass. Strahd would surely have minions guarding the roads. They had to share what little food and water they had, since many of their supplies had been left behind when they fled the Wood Fane. Rowan's coffin had also been lost in the retreat. The travelers had not gone far when Navarra felt the distinct sensation of being watched by magic. She ducked under a thicket, trying to obscure where she was, and warned the others to do the same. He was watching her. While all 5 of them lay huddled together, she explained that scrying spells could last for only a few minutes at a time. They waited. When Navarra did not feel Strahd's presence any more, she gave a signal, and they emerged. Running through the woods, they tried to put as much distance as they could between themselves and the place where Strahd had spotted them. Then Navarra explained in some detail what it felt like to be scryed upon. A disturbed grimace crossed Irina's face.
"I know that feeling," she said. "It happens to me every day, sometimes 2 or 3 times. In fact, I think it's happening right now."
Irina dove under a pile of leaves, and the others followed suit. Again they waited before moving on. As their journey continued, Irina and Navarra took turns hiding whenever they felt Strahd gaze upon them. Navarra never said it, but a part of her wished Strahd could see her. She wished she could talk to him somehow, maybe reason with him. But seeing the fear in her friend's eyes reminded her that they needed her help. The howling of wolves could be heard every now and then, sometimes closer, sometimes farther. At one point they spotted a host of spectres and banshees following them, drifting among the mists of the forest. Navarra turned herself and her friends invisible until the ghostly figures passed on. They traveled for another 10 miles, walking by foot until they reached Luna Lake. From there they could see the bridge of Solanka Pass in the distance. After flying to the other side of the river, they continued picking their way eastward through the forest. It was slow progress, especially since they stopped to take cover every time Irina or Navarra felt the sensation of being watched. Their attempts to hide from Strahd's divination were likely futile, but they kept hiding anyway, if only for the sake of their own sanity. They bedded down in a grove of trees at the base of the mountain. It was hard to keep track of time in the eternal night, but they were exhausted, and they would need rest before ascending Mount Gaucus. When they all awoke after a few hours of fitful sleep, they began climbing up the mountainside. The wind whipped around Navarra, sending a chill through her bones. They all donned their warm cloaks, except for Rowan, who gave hers to Navarra. To keep warm, the druid transformed into a bear with a thick coat of white fur. The sky grew overcast, and snow began to fall. They trudged up the steep incline and wound their way up Mount Gaucus. When Casimir told them they were close to the temple's entrance, Navarra felt Strahd once again. She hid behind a boulder and cried. She hated crying, but there was nothing for it. When enough time had passed, Navarra stepped back on the path and wiped her tears. Irina walked close beside her.
"I'm sorry, Navarra, for what I said back at Casimir's place. You see, after we rescued you, I initially thought you and I had gone through the same thing. I thought you would hate Strahd as much as I do. But when you didn't, I felt alone again. I felt like you were trying to convince everyone that he wasn't so bad, and that my experiences didn't matter. I know you never meant to hurt me or invalidate the pain I've been through, but that's how it felt.
Navarra sniffed back tears.
But I can see now that you've also been hurt,
Irina said.
We are both haunted and tortured by him in different ways. I was wrong to resent you. Can you forgive me?
Navarra nodded and hugged her, bursting into tears again.
We can do this, Navarra,
Irina said with determination.
I have faith we can do this. Together.
Henry saw Irina waiting for him on the trail ahead. She looked tired, but was trying not to show it.
I was just talking with Navarra,
Irina said.
I think the constant scrying is wearing on her nerves.
Is she going to be all right? Henry asked. He looked ahead at the warlock, who was farther along the trail with Casimir and Rowan, trudging through the snow.
I think so,
Irina said.
We just need to keep showing her that we still trust her. Henry, I need to ask you for a favor.
Anything, he said.
When Strahd finds us, he'll most likely try to take me. If he does, I don't want to be taken alive.
Irina, no.
No, you listen, Henry. I need you to hear me. If he tries to take me, you have to do this.
It's not going to come to that, Henry said, shaking his head. But then he remembered the story of the girl in Berez. What was her name? Marina. Yes, that was it. She was the reincarnation of Tatiana, who had been killed by her own father to protect her from being turned. Then there was Petrina, who had died at the hands of her own people to keep her from the vampire. And most of all, there was Tatiana herself, who had jumped from a cliff rather than submit to Strahd's advances. How many others had died? And how many had been killed at the hands of friends or family? Was there mercy in these killings? Or was it merely the will of the dark powers to keep Strahd from his desires?
I'm not giving up hope,
Irina said.
But we always knew we didn't stand much of a chance. Whatever happens, I just don't want to lose myself, to be turned, or...
She glanced at Navarra.
Or to lose touch with reality. Please, Henry.
Henry bit the inside of his cheek and slowly nodded.